There's a feeling I think most of us know. You come home from the grocery store with more bags than you should have carried. Instead of making 2 trips, you decide to carry everything at once. The handles dig into your fingers, your arms ache, but somehow you make it to the kitchen. You set the bags down, and for a moment, your arms still feel heavy. It's strange how the weight lingers, even after it's gone. I've been wondering if life can be like that. How many things have I carried for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to set them down? Not the obvious things, not the responsibilities that belong to us. I'm talking about the invisible weight, expectations, old disappointments, the need to explain ourselves, the pressure to make everything work, conversations we've replayed 100 times, conversations that never even happened. Sometimes we carry these things so quietly that no one else knows they're there. And after enough time, neither do we. They begin to feel like part of who we are. I've realized something recently. Most of the weight I've carried wasn't picked up because I was weak. It was picked up because I cared. I cared about people. I cared about doing the right thing. I cared about relationships lasting. I cared about leaving things better than I found them. There's nothing wrong with caring. In fact, I hope I never lose that. But somewhere along the way, caring quietly became carrying. I started believing that if I loved something enough, I could somehow hold it together. Maybe you felt that too, trying to fix what isn't yours to fix, trying to convince people who have already made up their minds, trying to keep peace that requires 2 people to protect it, trying to hold together seasons that have already begun to change. The garden has been reminding me that love doesn't work that way. These last few weeks, I've been walking through beds that are changing. The cucumber vines that worked so hard through the season are beginning to fade. Some tomato plants have given everything they had. There are leaves to clear away, seeds to save, compost to spread. Places that looked full just a few weeks ago are beginning to open again. At first, it can feel like loss, but the garden doesn't see it that way. It isn't mourning what was, it's preparing for what's next. Nothing wasted. The vines that fed us will become food for the soil. The seeds will become another season. Even the empty spaces have a purpose. I've spent years thinking that faithfulness meant holding on. The garden has been teaching me that sometimes faithfulness looks like letting go, not because something had no value, but because it already fulfilled its purpose. One lesson has stayed with me more than any other. I can prepare the soil, I can water consistently, I can feed the plants, I can prune what needs pruning, I can pull the weeds before they spread, but I cannot make a tomato ripen. Somewhere between planting and harvesting, my responsibility ends. The rest isn't mine to carry. That realization hasn't only changed the way I garden, it's changing the way I live. There are things I should care for. There are things that I've only been trying to control. Those are not the same. I've learned that I can show up with love without believing I'm responsible for someone else's choices. I can give generously without believing I have to empty myself completely. I can offer wisdom without forcing someone to receive it. I can pray without believing I have to manufacture the answer. Maybe wisdom isn't learning how to carry more. Maybe wisdom is finally recognizing what was never placed in our hands to begin with. The funny thing about carrying heavy things is that after a while, they stop feeling heavy. Not because they've become lighter, but because we've become accustomed to them. We adjust our posture, we compensate. We forget what walking freely even felt like. Sometimes familiar weight disguises itself as necessary weight. Maybe that's why letting go can feel so uncomfortable. Not because we're losing something important, but because we're meeting a version of ourselves we haven't known in a very long time. This week, I've been cleaning the garden for another season, pulling tired plants, saving seeds, adding compost, looking ahead instead of behind. None of it feels rushed. The garden isn't anxious about what's leaving. It already knows another season is coming. There's a quiet confidence in that. Not because every season is easy, but because every season has its work. Maybe that's true for us too. Maybe there are things that once belonged in our hands that no longer do. Not because we've stopped caring, but because we've learned the difference between caring and carrying. I've begun to notice something beautiful. Hands that are no longer clinging are finally free. Free to gather seed, free to prepare soil, free to notice the butterfly that landed nearby, free to receive today's work instead of yesterday's worries. Perhaps that's what peace has always looked like. Not a life without responsibility, but a life where responsibility has found its own proper place, where love no longer demands control, where faith no longer competes with fear, where today's work is enough for today. I still have things to carry. The people I love, the work I've been given, the garden entrusted to my care, the quiet life I'm continuing to build. Those things matter, but so does knowing what doesn't belong in my hands anymore. Because every time I set down a weight that was never mine, I discovered something I couldn't see before. A little more space, a little more peace, a little more gratitude, a little more wonder. Maybe that's the quiet gift of every changing season. Not that it asks us to become someone else, but that it gently teaches us what we no longer need to carry. And perhaps that's how we begin making room. Be well, and I'll meet you here for the next harvest.